Have you heard what happened to King Charles? The news is unlike anything the monarchy has faced in decades, and the ramifications could ripple far beyond the palace walls. Imagine waking up one morning, carrying not just the crown but the weight of an entire nation's expectations, only to be confronted with a reality that no king, or anyone, for that matter, wants to face. What would you do if you were told there is no cure, that the battle your body is fighting is one without an end? That's exactly the position King Charles now finds himself in. The man the world has long seen as composed, regal, and unshakable is suddenly facing a nightmare that threatens not just his health, but the very stability of the monarchy he has worked his entire life to uphold. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. It started quietly, behind the thick stone walls of Buckingham Palace, a whisper among doctors, aides, and close confidants. What began as subtle symptoms, tiredness, fleeting discomfort, and minor ailments, gradually intensified, until one fateful day, the results of a series of medical tests shattered the carefully maintained illusion of invincibility. The diagnosis was devastating. A so-called no-cure illness, something that would linger, gnawing at the body, and leaving no real path to recovery. For a king, whose every day is scrutinized under the unforgiving glare of cameras, media, and global expectation, this is more than just a personal tragedy. It is a public crisis, a story that unfolds at the intersection of human vulnerability and royal duty. What makes this story so urgent, so compelling, is the sheer contrast between perception and reality. Publicly, Charles maintains his calm, appearing at ceremonial events, delivering speeches with the poise we have come to expect. But behind closed doors, the situation is far grimmer. Trusted aides have described tense moments where Charles retreats from view, where the weight of his illness, combined with the pressures of the throne, seems almost unbearable. One insider said it feels like he's carrying an invisible burden, a private struggle that the world cannot see. And yet, as much as the palace tries to control the narrative, whispers leak, hints emerge, and the media senses a story that could redefine not just a reign, but public understanding of what it means to be a monarch in crisis. And here's where it gets even more complicated. This isn't just about health. Every decision King Charles makes now is colored by his condition. How he manages public appearances, the events he attends, the speeches he gives. All of it carries a tension that few of us can truly grasp. Imagine balancing diplomacy, statecraft, and centuries of tradition while battling an illness that refuses to relent. That is the world Charles now inhabits. It's a world where every handshake, every public smile, every formal appearance could betray a flicker of pain, a moment of vulnerability. And the world is watching. The press, both friendly and hostile, is relentless. Every sign of fatigue, every subtle lapse is dissected, analyzed, and often distorted for maximum impact. But let's take a step back and look at the human side of this story. Charles, like anyone else, has dreams, fears, and a deep desire to leave a legacy. He has spent decades preparing for his role, absorbing the lessons of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and studying the intricate dance of monarchy and politics. He has cultivated relationships across nations, nurtured charitable initiatives, and worked tirelessly to embody the dignity expected of a king. And yet, all of this preparation, all of this experience, collides with a personal reality that is utterly uncontrollable. When the body falters, no amount of training or protocol can substitute. And that collision, that contrast between preparation and helplessness, is what makes this story so gripping, so painfully human. You might wonder, how does the palace respond to something like this? There's a veneer of calm, of meticulous scheduling and protocol, but insiders describe an atmosphere that is anything but serene. Meetings are more cautious, conversations more guarded. Even the staff, trained for years to handle crises with discretion, have felt the strain. Rumors of palace tensions and secret strategies circulate, feeding the curiosity of a public that has long been fascinated by the inner workings of royal life. And as much as the monarchy seeks to protect Charles, there is no escaping the fact that his health, and the news surrounding it, is a story that the world will consume, debate, and dissect endlessly. Now let's talk about the psychological toll. This is not just a physical battle, it is a mental one. Being King Charles means wearing a mask of composure at all times, but insiders reveal that behind the scenes, the king has experienced moments of profound fear, doubt, and even isolation. The isolation is particularly brutal. The very people who are supposed to support and advise him, the family, the closest aides, are bound by protocol, by tradition, and by a need to present unity and strength. This means that some struggles are endured privately, leaving Charles with a burden that few can truly understand. And yet, it is in these moments, these private struggles, that the humanity of the king emerges. He is not just a figurehead or a symbol. He is a man grappling with circumstances that challenge every ounce of his resilience. And what about the public? For decades, King Charles has been in the spotlight, scrutinized for everything from his personal life to his philanthropic endeavors. Now, his private health crisis threatens to blur the lines between public perception and private reality. The media thrives on speculation. Headlines hint at decline, at crisis, at scandal. Social media amplifies every rumor, every misstep, creating an environment where even minor health updates can be blown into stories of monumental consequence. For a figure like Charles, the challenge is staggering. How do you maintain authority, dignity, and stability while being acutely aware that the world is watching your every struggle? It is at this intersection, between the relentless gaze of the public, the demanding protocols of monarchy, and the unyielding advance of illness, that the true drama unfolds. And what makes it even more compelling is the timing. In a period when global politics are volatile, when the monarchy faces questions about relevance, succession, and legacy, any sign of vulnerability in the king can have consequences far beyond his own personal sphere. Each decision, each appearance, each word spoken carries an amplified weight. A single misstep could fuel narratives of instability, incite criticism, and even influence public opinion in ways that reverberate for years. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this story is the uncertainty. Unlike a political scandal or a public misstatement, illness does not offer closure or resolution. There is no debate to settle, no compromise to broker. The unpredictability of the disease, coupled with the high stakes of kingship, creates a tension that is almost unbearable. Every day brings new challenges, new symptoms, new considerations. And every day, Charles must navigate this terrain with the poise expected of a monarch, knowing that the world's eyes are upon him. So why does this matter to you, the viewer? Because this is not just a story about a king or a palace. It is a story about human vulnerability under pressure, about the collision of duty and frailty, about the extraordinary expectations placed on individuals who are, at the end of the day, human beings. It is about a man facing one of life's greatest challenges while simultaneously carrying the weight of centuries of tradition and public expectation. And as the revelations in this video unfold, you will see that the implications stretch far beyond one man's personal struggle. They touch on questions of leadership, resilience, legacy, and the often unseen human costs of power. But what comes next is something that no one could have anticipated. The disease, the palace pressures, and the intricate web of family and political dynamics are converging in ways that are unpredictable, dramatic, and utterly devastating. The next chapters of this story will reveal moments of vulnerability that shock, decisions that astonish, and tensions that could reshape the monarchy as we know it. And as you watch, you may find yourself asking, how much can one person endure? And more importantly, what will King Charles do when the world is watching and the walls of the palace can no longer contain the storm? The journey you are about to embark on is not just a royal exposé. It is a human story, a tale of resilience, crisis, and the complex interplay of duty and personal survival. Every revelation you will encounter is built on first-hand accounts, insider perspectives, and careful examination of a situation that is evolving even as we speak. And by the end of this video, the picture that emerges will challenge your assumptions, provoke your curiosity, and leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about King Charles and the monarchy he leads. It all began with a routine checkup, or at least, that's what everyone was told. On the surface, it seemed ordinary. King Charles had a string of engagements, formal duties, and ceremonial appearances. His schedule was packed. Royal tours, charity events, meetings with foreign dignitaries. But behind the polished smiles and precise gestures, something was off. Subtle signs, almost imperceptible at first. A fleeting look of fatigue, a hand pressed to the small of his back, a rare pause during a speech that the public barely noticed. But insiders saw it. They sensed that something was wrong, that beneath the regal exterior, Charles was grappling with a challenge that no amount of preparation could fully mitigate. The first whispers began with his closest aides. One morning, a trusted doctor quietly remarked that Charles had shown irregular test results. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough to warrant a closer look. The language was careful, clinical, measured, yet the meaning was unmistakable. There could be trouble ahead. In a palace accustomed to perfection, even the hint of imperfection is alarming. And in Charles's case, this was more than a minor concern. It was the first indication of a journey that would test him in ways the public could not imagine. Imagine being the king, the figurehead of an entire nation, and being told that the problem is more serious than anyone anticipated. That's exactly what happened. One test led to another. Specialist consultations, second opinions, cross-checking results. The diagnosis came with a weight that no royal decree could lift. The disease, its name carefully concealed from casual scrutiny, was one of those rare, relentless conditions for which medicine had no definitive cure. The phrase "no cure" echoed through the palace corridors like a specter. For anyone, such words are terrifying. For a king, they are earth-shattering. Charles's immediate reaction was a mix of disbelief and stoicism. He had faced challenges before, of course, personal losses, public scrutiny, the relentless pressure of duty, but this was different. This was something beyond protocol, beyond advisors' guidance. This was his body betraying him in a way that could not be controlled, negotiated, or elegantly managed. In private, aides noticed him withdrawing for long moments of reflection, staring out of windows into the palace gardens, grappling with a reality that few could ever understand. And yet, there was the paradox of kingship. The very nature of being a monarch demands strength, composure, and resilience, even when one is falling apart inside. Charles could not simply cancel engagements, retreat indefinitely, or publicly reveal the depth of his condition without triggering widespread alarm. Every move required strategy, every word careful calculation. Every public appearance, no matter how brief, was a balancing act between projecting stability and concealing vulnerability. The stakes could not have been higher, but the private struggle was unrelenting. Late nights spent in consultation with specialists, the endless barrage of medical tests, the pressure to remain composed in front of staff and family, all of it chipped away at his reserves of mental and emotional energy. One aide, speaking anonymously, described moments when Charles's hands would tremble as he reviewed schedules and obligations. Another recounted his rare flashes of frustration when the king would quietly question, sometimes aloud, the fairness of being burdened by illness while carrying the responsibilities of a nation. These are moments rarely glimpsed by the public, yet they reveal the profound human dimension of a man who, for decades, has been seen as nearly untouchable. And there was the psychological weight. The knowledge that time is finite, that every day is precious, combined with the inevitability of progression, created an invisible pressure that few could endure. How does a king reconcile the reality of mortality with the expectation of permanence? How does one confront vulnerability in a role defined by authority and tradition? These are questions that Charles faced alone in moments that the public will never witness. The contrast between public duty and private struggle is stark, and it forms the emotional core of this story. Amidst the shock of diagnosis, the king had to navigate the reactions of those closest to him. Family members, loyal aides, advisors, all were caught in a delicate dance between support, discretion, and protocol. There were moments of tension, subtle disagreements over how much to reveal, which engagements to postpone, and how to manage the media. The royal household is a tightly controlled environment, yet the gravity of Charles's condition introduced an element of unpredictability. Even seasoned staff, trained to handle crises with composure, found themselves grappling with uncertainty. Meanwhile, the The media's gaze was omnipresent. Even without official confirmation, rumors began to circulate. Pundits speculated, tabloids hinted, and the public, hungry for insight into royal life, absorbed every hint, every subtle change in appearance. Charles's once predictable routines were scrutinized under a microscope. Social media amplified these whispers into narratives of decline, concern, and speculation. For a king whose every gesture is emblematic, this kind of attention magnified the stakes enormously. Every handshake, every smile, every brief public statement was dissected for signs of fatigue or illness. Yet even as he faced these pressures, Charles demonstrated a remarkable resilience. Reports suggest that he remained committed to his duties, attending public events with as much grace as possible, often pushing himself beyond comfort. These appearances were not merely ceremonial. They were acts of defiance against the notion that illness could diminish his authority or undermine his role. But resilience has limits. No amount of composure can fully mask physical pain or emotional turmoil, and insiders confirm that there were moments when the strain was palpable, when the weight of illness, responsibility, and public scrutiny seemed almost too great to bear. And then there were the private consultations, the strategies devised behind closed doors to manage the progression of the disease while maintaining appearances. Specialists recommended treatments, lifestyle adjustments, and monitoring plans. Advisors debated the optics of rescheduling engagements versus pressing forward. Family members offered support, sometimes clashing with staff over the best course of action. The palace became a hive of activity, each decision fraught with implications, each adjustment carrying potential consequences. It was a world where medical reality, public perception, and royal protocol collided in ways that could not have been predicted. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of the diagnosis was its unpredictability. Unlike a public scandal, which can be managed with statements, apologies, or damage control, illness is inherently uncontrollable. Symptoms fluctuate, progress is uncertain, and the long-term outcome is opaque. For Charles, this unpredictability added a layer of psychological tension. Every day brought new variables. Unexpected fatigue, fleeting discomfort, or sudden bouts of stress that interfered with obligations. Even minor fluctuations could generate concern among staff and family, amplifying the sense of fragility that the king so carefully concealed. The human dimension of the story cannot be overstated. Charles is not merely a monarch. He is a father, a husband, and an individual with personal fears and desires. Insiders note moments of profound vulnerability. Times when he confided quietly to trusted aides about his fears for the future, about his concern for the monarchy's stability, and about the ways in which illness challenges the very identity he has cultivated over decades. These moments, rarely observed by the public, provide a window into the tension between personal fragility and public responsibility. And yet, despite the gravity of the situation, Charles continued to engage with the world, to project dignity and authority. He navigated interviews, engagements, and public appearances with a careful precision, masking the internal struggle that raged beneath the surface. This duality, between private suffering and public composure, is at the heart of the story. It is what makes the narrative not only compelling but deeply human. Because in this moment, we see that even a king, a figure often perceived as nearly invincible, is subject to the vulnerabilities of the human condition. But the story does not end here. The diagnosis, though devastating, is only the first step in a series of events that will challenge Charles in ways that are both unexpected and profound. The disease sets the stage for a cascade of pressures, family tensions, political considerations, public scrutiny, and the relentless demands of duty. How Charles navigates these challenges will reveal not only his resilience, but also the fragility of an institution built on centuries of tradition and protocol. And as he confronts these realities, the next revelation is poised to strike, one that will shake the palace, the monarchy, and perhaps the world. A decision looms on the horizon, one that could redefine Charles's reign, alter public perception, and raise questions that no advisor can fully answer. The stage is set for a drama that blends human vulnerability, royal responsibility, and the unpredictable nature of illness. a drama that is just beginning to unfold. The king's journey through this shocking diagnosis is far from over. But what comes next, how he responds, what choices he makes, and how the palace and the world react, will set the tone for a story that is as riveting as it is devastating. And it is a story that will keep unfolding, each chapter more revealing than the last, each twist more unexpected than the one before. And just as Charles begins to adjust to the harsh reality of his diagnosis, a new complication emerges. Something that no amount of preparation or resilience could have foreseen. A secret, long buried in the palace archives, comes to light, threatening to complicate an already delicate situation. The diagnosis was devastating. But what comes next will push the king to a breaking point no one anticipated. Have you ever wondered what it's like to carry the weight of a nation on your shoulders while your own body begins to betray you? For King Charles, this is no hypothetical. The devastating diagnosis he received in the previous chapter was only the beginning. The physical, emotional, and psychological toll began to mount almost immediately, revealing a side of monarchy rarely seen by the public. A human struggle hidden behind layers of protocol, duty, and expectation. At first, the signs were subtle. Insiders described small but unmistakable changes. A slower gait in the corridors of Buckingham Palace, a flicker of pain as he stood during long ceremonies, and fleeting moments when his usual composure seemed to falter. To the casual observer, Charles still carried himself with dignity, smiling at the cameras, greeting dignitaries, and delivering speeches with practiced eloquence. But those closest to him knew better. Each public appearance was a carefully choreographed act of resilience, a balancing performance between authority and vulnerability. Every handshake, every nod, every pause was carefully calibrated to hide the reality of a body that was under siege. The physical symptoms alone were taxing. The illness, relentless and unforgiving, brought fatigue that no amount of rest could fully alleviate. There were days when Charles felt drained before even stepping out of bed, yet the obligations of kingship demanded he move forward. Even a brief lapse could trigger concern among aides, fueling speculation that the public would inevitably pick up on. And it wasn't just fatigue. The condition brought moments of discomfort that were unpredictable, sometimes sharp and sudden, sometimes lingering and dull. These physical intrusions into his daily life began to erode the boundaries between private struggle and public expectation, creating tension that no protocol could fully resolve. But the toll extended far beyond the body. The emotional and psychological weight was immense. Being a monarch means living life under constant scrutiny. Every action is observed, every word analyzed, and every gesture interpreted. For Charles, this scrutiny became even more intense once the diagnosis became known to the palace inner circle. There were whispers, subtle glances, and heightened caution in every interaction. People who had worked alongside him for decades found themselves tiptoeing around conversations, fearful of inadvertently exacerbating his stress. Meanwhile, Charles wrestled with feelings of isolation and frustration. How does one maintain authority while feeling physically and mentally fragile? How does a king reconcile duty with vulnerability? These questions weighed heavily on him, adding layers of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. Sleep, the one refuge that might offer respite, became elusive. The combination of stress, physical discomfort, and the relentless mental replay of obligations led to restless nights. Insiders recounted instances of Charles pacing in his private chambers late into the night, sometimes confiding in a close aide about his fears, sometimes retreating into silence. In those moments, the facade of regal control fell away, revealing a man grappling with mortality, responsibility, and the uncertain future of the institution he had prepared to lead his entire life. Public perception, meanwhile, intensified the pressure. Media outlets, ever vigilant for the slightest sign of weakness, scrutinized every detail. Headlines speculated about his health, subtle changes in appearance, and moments of fatigue. Social media amplified every rumor, creating a feedback loop where public curiosity and anxiety only heightened the stakes. Charles had to navigate this relentless spotlight while contending with his own physical limitations. Every event required careful planning. Short appearances, strategic seating, supportive aides nearby, all designed to manage both optics and personal endurance. Yet amidst these challenges, Charles's commitment to duty never wavered. He continued to attend engagements, meet dignitaries, and participate in ceremonies with the poise expected of a monarch. But the strain was visible to those paying close attention. There were times when his voice faltered slightly during speeches, when a hand trembled ever so slightly as he held a document, or when his posture reflected the weight he carried. These were not dramatic, public collapses. They were subtle signs of a body under pressure, a mind balancing responsibility with vulnerability, and a man wrestling with the profound personal implications of his illness. The psychological toll manifested in other ways as well. Charles, who had long been known for his composure, began showing signs of frustration in private. Meetings that once flowed smoothly were interrupted by moments of agitation or exhaustion. Decisions that normally came easily now required extended deliberation. The combination of illness and relentless duty created a cognitive load that few could fully comprehend. Even those closest to him found themselves treading lightly, unsure how to provide support without undermining his authority or exposing vulnerability. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. While support was abundant, the expectations of a royal household are unforgiving. Charles's children, advisors, and senior staff had to navigate their own emotions while maintaining the appearance of unity and composure. Discussions about succession, public engagements, and medical treatment became fraught with tension. Even minor disagreements or differing opinions carried outsized consequences, as any perceived discord could spark media speculation or public concern. Charles had to manage not only his own condition, but also the emotional and strategic implications for everyone around him. One of the most significant aspects of the toll on his health was the way it reshaped his daily routine. Tasks that had once been straightforward required far more energy and focus. A simple meeting could become exhausting. A public engagement could leave him drained for days. Advisors had to create contingencies for every eventuality, from health flare-ups to unforeseen complications. Yet even with meticulous planning, uncertainty loomed. The unpredictability of the illness meant that no schedule could fully protect him from moments of fatigue or pain, leaving a constant undercurrent of anxiety for both Charles and those around him. Social interactions, too, were affected. Charles, who had always been adept at connecting with people, dignitaries, charity workers, and members of the public, found that fatigue sometimes made these interactions challenging. Maintaining warmth, engagement, and attentiveness required more energy than before. The gap between internal struggle and external expectation grew more pronounced, creating a tension that was emotionally exhausting. Every smile, every handshake, every expression of interest had to be carefully measured against the toll it took on his physical and mental reserves. The emotional stakes were further heightened by awareness of legacy. Charles has spent a lifetime preparing to ascend the throne, studying the lessons of Queen Elizabeth II, and shaping his own approach to leadership. Facing a serious illness while holding the reins of monarchy added a layer of urgency and anxiety. Questions about public perception, succession, and the long-term stability of the institution weighed heavily on him. Could he maintain the dignity and authority expected of a king while confronting his own vulnerability? Could he fulfill his obligations without compromising his health or the trust of the public? These were questions that gnawed at him constantly, fueling both determination and unease. Even the palace staff, trained to handle crises, sensed the strain. Reports describe heightened tension, subtle shifts in behavior, and a pervasive awareness that their leader was facing something profoundly challenging. Meetings were more deliberate, interactions more cautious, and the usual rhythm of palace life disrupted by the constant need to monitor, adjust, and respond. Every decision, every action carried additional weight because of the underlying context of illness. And yet, amidst all this pressure, there were moments of resilience, quiet victories that underscored Charles's determination. He continued to participate in initiatives he cared deeply about, championing causes and fulfilling ceremonial duties with commitment. These acts of engagement were not merely symbolic. They were expressions of defiance against the constraints imposed by illness, affirmations of identity and purpose in a context that threatened to diminish both. But even with these moments of strength, the toll on his health remained relentless. Each day was a balancing act, each engagement a careful choreography of energy, expectation, and composure. The combination of physical strain, emotional stress, and public scrutiny created an environment that tested the limits of human endurance. And as the weeks and months progressed, insiders noted that the cumulative effect was beginning to show in ways that were subtle but unmistakable. Every king, no matter how prepared, eventually reaches a point where private struggle collides with public duty in unavoidable ways. For Charles, that moment was approaching. The disease, unpredictable and unyielding, was not just a personal challenge. It was a catalyst for broader consequences, affecting family dynamics, palace operations, and public perception. And as each day passed, the stakes grew higher, the strain more visible, and the pressure more intense. What makes this chapter of Charles's life particularly compelling is the intersection of human vulnerability with centuries of institutional expectation. We see a man grappling with forces beyond his control, trying to reconcile personal limitations with the immense demands of kingship. The tension between public performance and private reality, between duty and frailty, is palpable, and it is in this tension that the drama unfolds. And just as it seemed that Charles had begun to find a rhythm, to balance his personal struggle with public duty, another complication emerged. A series of unexpected symptoms surfaced, subtle at first, but growing more pronounced, forcing him and his advisors to reassess every engagement, every meeting, and every aspect of his schedule. The toll on his health was no longer a private matter. It was becoming a strategic challenge, with consequences that could ripple through the monarchy and beyond. And yet, even in the face of mounting strain, Charles persisted. His determination to maintain dignity and authority under the most trying circumstances is remarkable, a testament to both personal resilience and the weight of centuries of tradition. But as the situation intensified, the next chapter in this story promised revelations that would challenge not just the king, but the very institution he serves. The toll on his health was just the beginning. The intersection of illness, duty, and public scrutiny was creating a pressure cooker environment, one that would force difficult decisions, provoke unexpected tensions, and ultimately lead to moments of vulnerability that no one anticipated. And just when it seemed the strain had reached its limit, another crisis emerged, something that would test Charles in ways that were previously unimaginable, threatening to upend both personal and institutional stability. What really happens behind the palace doors, far from the public gaze? Have you ever wondered what secrets a centuries-old institution might hide when its leader is facing an unprecedented personal crisis? For King Charles, the world sees carefully staged ceremonies, polished speeches, and composed smiles. But behind those golden doors, a very different reality is unfolding, a reality fraught with tension, anxiety, and a kind of private chaos that no headline can capture. It begins with the inner workings of the palace itself. Buckingham is not just a residence. It's a sprawling complex of offices, corridors, and staff quarters where every detail is meticulously controlled. Protocol dictates behavior, appearance, and hierarchy, but protocol can only stretch so far when a king's health is in jeopardy. Insiders describe an atmosphere of hushed conversations, careful monitoring of every gesture, and an almost palpable sense of anticipation that something significant is brewing. Even minor events, a delayed breakfast, a canceled meeting, set off a cascade of speculation among aides and staff. The pressure isn't only physical, it's psychological. Every staff member, from private secretaries to security personnel, feels the weight of responsibility. One wrong word, one misstep, could inadvertently exacerbate the situation or create a leak to the press. And yet, the emotional strain is perhaps heaviest on those closest to the king: family members, trusted aides, and advisors who must navigate a delicate balance between support and discretion. For them, the palace is not merely a workplace. It is a stage where mistakes can carry enormous consequences, and where every decision is scrutinized for its potential ripple effects. Within this environment, Charles's private battles take on a new dimension. He is not merely dealing with his illness. He is navigating the expectations of a royal household that is steeped in tradition, hierarchy, and a need for perfection. In practical terms, this means that his choices are constrained at every turn. Should he rest today, risking the optics of absence at a key engagement? Should he press forward, risking fatigue or a public display of vulnerability? The stakes are immense, and the decisions often come down to a delicate calculus of perception versus well-being. Family dynamics add another layer of complexity. Even the closest relatives have agendas, emotional needs, and historical tensions that shape interactions. While love and loyalty exist, so too do undercurrents of expectation and rivalry. Advisors have noted subtle disagreements over scheduling, public messaging, and even medical treatment. Every conversation, no matter how benign, carries a potential double meaning. In these moments, the line between familial support and strategic maneuvering blurs, creating an environment where trust is both essential and precarious. The stakes are further heightened by the awareness that any private struggle has public consequences. In a monarchy, the personal and the political are intertwined. If Charles falters in private, the effects ripple outward. Staff worry about optics, advisors calculate contingencies, and the family navigates an intricate web of protocol and public expectation. Even a minor misstep, a delayed appointment, a private disagreement leaked to a journalist, could ignite speculation and scrutiny on a scale that few can fully comprehend. And yet, despite the tension, Charles continues to lead. He meets with aides, reviews documents, and participates in decisions with the poise and authority expected of a monarch. But insiders note that even the most mundane activities now carry an added emotional weight. A simple conversation with a senior advisor can become a delicate negotiation, where words must be carefully chosen to maintain composure while conveying necessary information. Every action is performed under a kind of invisible microscope, where the slightest sign of fatigue, doubt, or discomfort could be observed, analyzed, and amplified. The psychological burden is immense. In a private moment, Charles confided to a trusted aide that he feels as though he is living in two worlds simultaneously. One public, defined by ceremony, tradition, and expectation. The other private, defined by vulnerability, uncertainty, and a constant negotiation with his own physical limits. The dissonance between these two worlds is exhausting, and even the king's resilience is tested daily. And then there is the matter of secrecy. The palace operates on a strict code. Information is controlled, leaks are rare, and discretion is paramount. But when a leader is facing a personal crisis of this magnitude, secrecy becomes both a shield and a trap. Staff and family members must carefully navigate what to disclose, to whom, and when. Misjudgments can create tension, undermine authority, or trigger public speculation. In this way, the very structure designed to protect the monarchy also amplifies the pressure, creating a kind of internal pressure cooker that few outside the palace walls can imagine. The impact on day-to-day operations is tangible. Meetings are scheduled with contingencies in mind, engagements are tightly controlled, and backup plans are developed for every scenario. Advisors monitor Charles's energy levels, adjust his calendar, and coordinate with medical professionals to ensure that no task overwhelms him. But even the most carefully crafted plans cannot anticipate every variable. Illness is unpredictable, and the king's body sometimes rebels against expectation, forcing last-minute changes and challenging the perception of stability that the monarchy must maintain. Family interactions, too, are increasingly complicated. The king's children and close relatives, while supportive, are navigating their own emotional responses, balancing care and concern with the demands of public duty. Discussions about succession, public appearances, and the monarchy's future become charged with emotion, and even subtle disagreements can carry significant implications. In this environment, the line between personal and institutional loyalty becomes blurred, creating a tense, sometimes volatile atmosphere behind closed doors. Despite all this, Charles exhibits remarkable determination. He continues to engage with advisors, participate in ceremonial duties, and fulfill his responsibilities with the poise expected of a monarch. These acts are not simply ceremonial. They are assertions of resilience, statements that the king will not allow illness to define his reign. But the strain is visible to insiders, who observe subtle signs of fatigue, moments of frustration, and rare, private admissions of vulnerability. These glimpses reveal the human reality behind the crown, a reality that is rarely seen by the public but profoundly felt within the palace. The emotional stakes are heightened further by awareness of legacy. Charles has spent decades preparing for this role, studying the lessons of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and cultivating a leadership style that balances tradition with modernity. Facing a serious health challenge while fulfilling these responsibilities amplifies the pressure, forcing him to confront questions about authority, perception, and long-term impact. Can he maintain the dignity expected of a monarch while contending with physical limitations? Can he navigate family dynamics and palace politics without compromising his own well-being or the integrity of the institution? Every day is a balancing act. Every engagement, every decision, every conversation carries amplified significance. The weight of responsibility, combined with the unpredictability of illness and the scrutiny of the public, creates a complex web of challenges that few could endure. Even seasoned aides, trained for crisis management, find themselves navigating unprecedented circumstances, balancing care and discretion with the demands of duty. And just when it seemed the internal pressure had reached its peak, another layer of complexity emerged. A private disagreement over scheduling and public appearances escalated unexpectedly, revealing tensions between the king's personal needs and the expectations of his advisors. The situation highlighted the delicate nature of palace politics, where even minor disputes can have outsized consequences. The intersection of illness, duty, and palace dynamics sets the stage for moments of conflict, revelation, and profound human struggle. Charles's journey is no longer solely defined by health. It is shaped by the pressures of leadership, the expectations of family, and the relentless scrutiny of a world watching closely. The stakes have never been higher, and the challenges never more complex. And as the king continues to navigate these royal nightmares, an unforeseen complication is about to surface, one that threatens to disrupt the fragile equilibrium within the palace, intensify internal tensions, and push Charles toward a decision that could redefine the trajectory of his reign. What does it truly mean to be a king when the world never blinks? When every move is recorded, every expression analyzed, and every word dissected? For King Charles, the stakes of public scrutiny have never been higher. The devastating diagnosis he received, coupled with the private turmoil behind palace doors, now intersects with one of the most relentless forces a modern monarch faces: the media. The British press has always maintained a complicated relationship with the royal family. There is admiration, fascination, and a desire for access, but there is also ruthless scrutiny. Every headline, every photograph, every report can amplify a minor incident into a national story. For Charles, the mere perception of weakness, fatigue, or hesitation could be magnified into narratives of decline or crisis. And when the press senses a gap in information, when official statements are sparse or carefully measured, they fill it with speculation, conjecture, and, at times, outright exaggeration. Even subtle signs of vulnerability are magnified. A tired expression captured at a charity event, a pause during a televised speech, a slight change in posture. These small, human moments become fodder for discussion, analysis, and judgment. Social media amplifies this effect exponentially. Every tweet, every video clip, every meme becomes part of a continuous narrative, creating a feedback loop where public perception influences media coverage, and media coverage further shapes perception. Charles's every move now exists in a high-stakes arena where private reality and public interpretation collide. The intensity of this scrutiny has tangible consequences for the king's health and well-being. Insiders report that he is acutely aware of the media gaze, carefully calibrating his appearance, demeanor, and speech to avoid feeding speculation. Every public engagement requires meticulous preparation. Short appearances to conserve energy, carefully selected venues, strategic lighting, and the presence of aides positioned to mitigate unforeseen complications. Even a minor lapse could spark a wave of speculation, putting additional pressure on him to maintain composure under duress. Yet the media's impact is not solely about optics. It also affects policy and decision-making. Advisors and aides constantly weigh the potential public response to Charles's choices, from health disclosures to ceremonial appearances. Every decision is filtered through the lens of media impact, creating a constant tension between personal well-being and public perception. Even routine communications, letters, speeches, and interviews must be scrutinized for tone, content, and potential interpretation. The stakes are immense because in the modern age, perception often becomes reality. One particularly challenging aspect is the intersection of health and rumor. Even without explicit confirmation, subtle changes in behavior or appearance can ignite speculation. The press, ever hungry for a story, seizes upon these cues, constructing narratives that may exaggerate or misrepresent reality. Social media users dissect images frame by frame, searching for signs of fatigue, discomfort, or decline. In this environment, Charles must navigate not only his illness but the relentless attention and interpretation that accompanies it, where a momentary lapse can become a public talking point within minutes. Insiders have described the king's heightened awareness of public scrutiny as both motivating and exhausting. On one hand, it drives him to maintain appearances, to push through fatigue, and to uphold the dignity expected of his office. On the other hand, it compounds stress, creating a constant internal dialogue about perception, judgment, and expectation. The combination of physical strain, emotional weight, and public pressure creates a uniquely intense form of stress, one that is difficult to alleviate even with the support of trusted advisors. Public pressure also extends beyond the press. Citizens, activists, and international observers all form opinions, expectations, and critiques based on what they see and hear. Every speech, every public appearance, every charitable engagement is assessed through this lens. The public's desire for transparency collides with the monarchy's tradition of discretion, creating tension between revealing enough to maintain trust and concealing enough to preserve dignity. Charles must navigate these competing demands while managing his health and the operational demands of monarchy. And the scrutiny is relentless. There is no reprieve from observation. Even private moments, if witnessed or leaked, can become public spectacle. Staff and family members are acutely aware of this, working tirelessly to protect the king's privacy while managing the constant flow of information. It is an environment where trust is fragile and every interaction carries the potential for exposure. The emotional toll of this pressure cannot be understated. A man already dealing with illness now must contend with an unyielding public gaze that leaves no room for error or vulnerability. The media's focus is often relentless and unforgiving. Sensational headlines suggest decline, mismanagement, or instability. Television programs dissect appearances, social media debates rage over minor gestures, and pundits speculate endlessly about the future of the monarchy. For Charles, this creates a dual challenge: maintaining personal dignity while countering narratives that could misrepresent his condition or abilities. Every engagement is a performance with consequences far beyond the immediate context, and the pressure to succeed is immense. Yet within this environment of scrutiny, there are also moments of human connection and support. Trusted aides provide guidance, framing appearances to mitigate stress. Family members offer reassurance and practical assistance, balancing care with the demands of protocol. Advisors develop strategies for managing media narratives, ensuring that the public receives accurate information while protecting the king's privacy. These measures create a delicate safety net, but one that is constantly tested by the unpredictable nature of illness and the relentless interest of the public. Even as Charles demonstrates resilience, the psychological weight of public scrutiny is constant. The king must manage not only his health but the perception of health, projecting confidence, composure, and capability at all times. The interplay of internal struggle and external expectation is profound. Every public smile, every nod of acknowledgement, every carefully chosen word is imbued with layers of meaning and consequence. The pressure to maintain authority under scrutiny magnifies the impact of illness, creating a unique and profound form of tension. Complicating matters further is the interplay between traditional media and social media. The former sets narratives, frames discussion, and constructs context. The latter amplifies, distorts, and disseminates information globally in real time. In this environment, rumors can become viral, speculation can escalate into controversy, and private moments can be interpreted as public crises. Charles must navigate this landscape with precision, awareness, and strategic foresight, balancing transparency with discretion, authenticity with performance. And yet, even amidst this pressure, the king continues to fulfill his duties. He engages with dignitaries, delivers speeches, attends ceremonies, and maintains a presence that reassures the public while managing personal limitations. These acts of commitment reflect not only resilience, but an understanding of the stakes. The monarchy's stability, public confidence, and the preservation of tradition all hinge on his ability to navigate scrutiny without faltering. But the relentless observation and commentary take their toll. Insiders report that Charles experiences moments of acute stress, anxiety, and self-doubt, often reflecting on the contrast between his public persona and private reality. These moments reveal the human dimension behind the crown, a man grappling with vulnerability, expectation, and the weight of centuries of tradition. The intersection of personal challenge and public pressure creates a tension that is both compelling and exhausting, one that defines this chapter of his life. And as the scrutiny intensifies, another layer of complication emerges. Unexpected reports begin circulating, subtle, unverified accounts of the king's condition, ambiguous statements from palace insiders, and interpretations of public appearances. Each news story adds to the pressure, forcing Charles and his advisors to respond, often in real time, while managing the emotional and physical consequences of his illness. The feedback loop between illness, duty, and public perception becomes increasingly complex, creating a scenario that few outside the palace can fully comprehend. The king's response is strategic, measured, and deliberate, yet the environment is unforgiving. Even the smallest lapse, a brief pause in speech, a moment of visible fatigue, or an altered appearance, can ignite speculation. Each day is a balancing act, an intricate performance where the stakes are immense and the margin for error is virtually non-existent. The weight of public scrutiny, combined with the relentless demands of duty and the physical toll of illness, creates a pressure cooker environment that challenges even the most resilient individuals. And just as Charles begins to adapt to this scrutiny, a new challenge emerges. An international event, unforeseen media leaks, or a minor misstep in public perception could ignite controversy, amplifying pressure in ways that affect not only the king, but the monarchy itself. The stage is set for a confrontation between personal vulnerability and public expectation, a confrontation that will test Charles's endurance, judgment, and capacity to maintain dignity under extraordinary circumstances. The king's journey under public scrutiny is far from over. Each headline, each social media post, each public engagement adds to the intensity of the moment, shaping the narrative in real time. The interplay of illness, duty, and media pressure defines this chapter of his reign, creating a complex web of challenges that no single individual or institution can navigate easily. And just when it seemed the scrutiny could not intensify further, another revelation loomed on the horizon. One that threatened to shake public perception, provoke debate, and force decisions that could alter the monarchy's trajectory. The world is watching, the stakes are immense, and Charles's next move could redefine everything. What happens when the most sacred institution in a country, the monarchy, is shaken from within? When illness, duty, and scrutiny collide, the family at the center becomes both a support system and a pressure cooker. For King Charles, the private reality of his no-cure diagnosis intersects with the complex dynamics of a family long accustomed to public performance, hierarchy, and unspoken rules. Behind the palace walls, tensions simmer, loyalties are tested, and secrets threaten to upend not only relationships but the monarchy itself. At first glance, the royal family presents unity. Public appearances show smiles, handshakes, and moments of warmth carefully choreographed for cameras. But insiders reveal that this surface harmony masks underlying tensions intensified by Charles's illness. Family members are not immune to fear, frustration, or ambition, and the stress of dealing with both personal vulnerability and public expectation amplifies these emotions. Minor disagreements can escalate quickly, each one layered with historical context, interpersonal dynamics, and the ever-present pressure of media scrutiny. Children, advisors, and close relatives navigate a complex web of care, expectation, and protocol. For Charles's children, balancing concern for their father with their own emerging roles and public responsibilities is emotionally challenging. Meetings with advisors and family discussions become arenas where personal desires, duty, and strategy intersect. One wrong word, one misinterpreted gesture, could be read as criticism or disrespect, creating tension behind the scenes. The stakes are enormous. Personal disagreements have the potential to ripple outward, affecting not just family relationships but public perception and institutional stability. The secrets lurking within the family further complicate matters. Royal life is steeped in tradition and discretion, yet decades of history have left certain truths buried. Hidden tensions, unresolved grievances, and private disagreements that the public will never see. The revelation of Charles's diagnosis, though devastating, became a catalyst for these secrets to emerge. Trusted aides report hushed conversations where past slights, frustrations, or long-suppressed opinions surface, complicating the already delicate dynamics within the palace. Even the closest family members must weigh the consequences of honesty against the need for discretion. Trust, always a precious commodity in royal life, becomes both vital and fragile. Charles must rely on family members for emotional support, but the intersection of personal interest, differing opinions, and long-standing history makes trust complex. Advisors and aides must mediate, ensuring that disagreements remain private and that the king's authority is maintained. Yet, even with careful management, the tension is palpable. Conversations that would have been routine become negotiations. Decisions that might seem straightforward carry layers of potential fallout. The emotional stakes are profound. Charles is not only contending with his own vulnerability, but also the delicate task of maintaining cohesion within his family. There are moments of frustration, fear, and doubt. There are instances when private disagreements reveal cracks in the carefully curated facade of unity. And in these moments, the human dimension of monarchy emerges, the clash of duty, love, and personal emotion against a backdrop of centuries-old tradition. One of the most challenging aspects is the interplay between secrecy and transparency. The monarchy operates on a strict code. Information is tightly controlled, rumors are suppressed, and discretion is paramount. But in the context of Charles's illness, the need for transparency among family members conflicts with the necessity of maintaining public composure. Private concerns, fears, and frustrations cannot be fully expressed without risking exposure. Yet the emotional burden of concealment intensifies the strain. Family members must navigate this delicate balance, supporting the king while protecting the monarchy's image. Tensions also arise over decision-making. As Charles's illness progresses, choices about public engagements, medical treatment, and personal schedules must be carefully considered. Family members, while supportive, sometimes hold differing opinions about the best course of action. These disagreements, though often subtle, carry weight. In a family where hierarchy, history, and protocol are deeply entrenched, even minor disputes can become emotionally charged, with implications for both personal relationships and institutional stability. Secrets, too, are weaponized, sometimes intentionally, sometimes inadvertently. The palace environment, already a high-stakes stage, becomes even more precarious when private information begins to circulate. Rumors about the king's health, disagreements over scheduling, or differing interpretations of events can feed speculation, heightening anxiety and testing loyalty. Even a small revelation, an offhand comment, or a minor discrepancy can become a catalyst for tension, reshaping relationships and influencing decisions. The psychological toll on Charles is intensified by these dynamics. Managing family tensions while contending with illness and public scrutiny requires extraordinary focus and resilience. He must navigate competing priorities, balance emotional needs against practical demands, and maintain authority even as personal vulnerability becomes more pronounced. The pressure is unrelenting, and the emotional cost is significant. Despite these challenges, there are moments of connection and support. Family members demonstrate care, concern, and loyalty, providing emotional grounding for the king. Small gestures, a quiet conversation, a shared meal, a private moment of reassurance become anchors in an otherwise turbulent environment. Yet even these moments are imbued with complexity, as every interaction carries multiple layers of meaning, consequence, and potential risk. The interplay of tension and support is particularly visible in discussions surrounding succession and public appearances. Charles must consider not only his health, but the broader implications for the monarchy. Family members, too, must reconcile personal emotion with institutional responsibility. The result is a delicate dance where the boundaries between care, influence, and authority are constantly negotiated. And as if the emotional and strategic complexity were not enough, additional secrets begin to surface. Documents, private correspondences, and insider accounts reveal discrepancies and long-buried tensions that challenge the perception of unity. Advisors scramble to manage potential fallout, balancing the need for discretion with the reality that the public and media are ever vigilant. Charles must weigh each revelation carefully, assessing both personal impact and institutional consequence. Emotional stakes escalate further as minor disagreements evolve into full-blown crises. Scheduling conflicts, differing opinions on public statements, and private frustrations intensify tension. Insiders report moments of confrontation, sometimes heated, sometimes quiet, but charged with emotion. The palace, a symbol of stability, becomes a site of complex negotiation and internal conflict, where personal relationships intersect with duty and perception in ways that few outside can comprehend. Amid this, Charles demonstrates remarkable composure and strategic acumen. He navigates disagreements with patience, leveraging his experience to maintain authority while acknowledging the emotions of family members. Yet the cumulative effect of illness, scrutiny,